What's up, guys? Jay Martin here, and my guest today is Mark Moss, the investor, entrepreneur, and host of the Market Disruptor Show. This is part one of a two-part interview. What we discuss in part one is trust, censorship, the disruption of the media industry, and we touch on some of the hot button current events currently, like the Joe Rogan debacle on Spotify and the Canadian Freedom Convoy that has now landed in Ottawa. I always love catching up with Mark. I hope you enjoyed this interview. 3 things before we jump in. Number 1, all the ad revenue generated from this YouTube channel is donated to an organization super close to my heart called Zero Ceiling. Zero Ceiling's mission is to end youth homelessness, and the way they do this is by giving at-risk urban youth the opportunity to relocate to beautiful wilderness areas, and they do a great job. Number 2, I publish a weekly newsletter. I love writing it. It's free. I'd love to have you join the team. There's a pinned comment right beneath this video where you can subscribe. And number 3, if you prefer to listen to my content as opposed to watch it, you can find me wherever you listen to your podcast. Just search for The Jay Martin Show. Here is Mark Moss, part 1. Enjoy.
This is Jay Martin.
What's up, guys? Jay Martin here, investor and CEO of Cambridge House. And I'm joined once again by Mark Moss, an investor, entrepreneur, financial educator, host of Market Disruptors. Mark, it's great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, Jay. I love being back. It was, man, we had so much fun catching up. We should have recorded it, but always a pleasure to talk to you.
That's the mistake I make so often. You know, I let the conversation roll before I hit record. And I'm like, oh my God, there's so much good stuff here. I got to get it. Mark, you've been on my YouTube show before, but I haven't had you on the podcast. This episode's going on both. So for anybody who's not familiar with you or who you are, could you open up with just a quick, who is Mark Moss and how do you spend your time?
Yeah, man. So I right out of high school, 18 years old, I started buying bank distressed properties, fixing them up and flipping them, and just kind of jumped right into the investor game. And I've been basically a full-time investor my whole career. Started a couple of businesses, I have Fortune 500 exits doing that. I got my butt kicked in a really bad way in the 2008 great financial crash. They say smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. And that's the truth. It taught me some valuable lessons, and it gave me a lot of motivation that I had been really good at making a lot of money, but I didn't understand this whole financial casino that was going on, the financial system. And so it motivated me to go figure that out. And I spent the last dozen years studying a phenomenon known as wealth transfers and how those work and what the Federal Reserve is doing, and became a gold bug. And then I realized I'm actually just a sound money advocate. And for the last 6 or 7 years, I've just been making educational content, trying to help people, trying to prevent people from making the same mistakes that I made when I got my butt kicked in 2008, because I was able to kind of bounce back, but a lot of people can't do that. And so, yeah, I make a lot of content doing that. I study mostly macro trends, heavy Bitcoin, some gold and some real estate. I speak around a lot of stages, YouTube content. I have a nationally syndicated radio show and podcast as well. And that's the high level view of what I'm doing. Yeah.
Okay. Now, the way you described it, you had this awakening, right, to the financial casino and wealth transfers. And I feel like, that's occurring right now at scale, right, around the world, definitely in North America. I'm up in Canada, you're in the US. Yeah. So, I think that's what's grown my channel, right? Like people are suddenly very curious about what the hell's going on out there, right? Yep. You must be seeing this trend and obviously you're moving into it. So what are the biggest questions that people are asking right now, Mark?
Well, there's a couple of things that are going on. And so you're absolutely right. There's a big trend going on. And there's a couple of things that are in play. It depends on how wide of a lens that you want to look at. I'm super encouraged by the amount of people jumping in, as you said, right? Like just for example, 10 years ago, nobody ever used the word fiat.
Right.
People didn't even know what the Federal Reserve was 10 years ago. 2009, Ron Paul wrote the book In the Fed, and that really started bringing attention to the Federal Reserve and what is the Federal Reserve and why do we care? I got to speak on the same stage with him a few weeks ago. That was pretty rad. Highlight of my year for sure. But so over the last 10 years, we've really seen this increase in education, and I think the reason why is obviously the financial system is broken. Obviously, Bitcoin has brought a lot of attention to that. But bigger than that, it's mega political shifts that change the world. And so if we look back through the long lens of history, the way that the world changes, the way that people organize, people work, and even politics changes based off of technology. And so really the last 250 years, the world has been moving towards centralization in the 1700s with the start of the Industrial Revolution. And Industrial Revolution brought people decentralized from the farms and the fields into the cities, into factories. In the last 250 years, it's been grown into giant, factories and assembly lines. In the early 1900s, Henry Ford created the assembly line. And then we had railroads and all this centralization that happened, which allowed the governments to get extremely, extremely big. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing technology is changing that, and it's starting to change the way that we see the world and we interact and so forth. If we go back for a perspective about 500 years ago, so about every 250 years, there's a political revolution. So 250 years ago was the American and the French Revolution, and that represented the American people pushing back on the centralization of the monarchy, and they started a decentralized government, a republic in the United States. 250 years before that was the Protestant Reformation. People pushed back on the centralization of the church and the state, and they set up a decentralized path towards God. And that was brought on 70 years earlier by a new technology called the printing press. The printing press started getting Bibles out in the hands of the people, and they said, wait a minute, church, everything you've been telling us is wrong. And as a matter of fact, we don't need you. And the church tried to hang on to that power. They labeled anybody that would read that and speak out of that, they labeled them a heretic, and they would kill them. And lots of people died. The state tried to hang on to that power, but the technology was too powerful and they couldn't hang on to their grip. The reason why that's important is then 250 years later, we moved to the Industrial Revolution. And now here we are 250 years later at the precipice, we're in the middle of another political 250-year revolution. And just like the printing press 70 years before the Protestant Reformation, the internet came out about 40 years ago. And the internet has done the same thing as the printing press, which is just put this information out there, and people are hungry for this information, and people see this information. And now the state, the powers that be, they cannot contain this. They can't contain it. People see this information. And just like the church and state were broken up once that information became decentralized, we're starting to see the powers that be, the state, lose their power grip as well. The internet has changed things in a rapid way, and it's only going to continue. At this point, we were talking before we started recording about the media, and the media has lost their grip as well. We have what they consider alternative news sources, the Joe Rogans, the Tucker Carlsons, and even shows like yours and mine, are getting way more views than mainstream media is today. And no matter how hard they try to control that narrative, they just can't. And so that's why I think there's this thirst. That's why there's this need for it, this want for it. And that's where I think it's really going.
I hope it's not too dramatic to say, but like, you touched on, heresy back in the day, right? Burned at the stake for being a heretic, like this occurred. And right away I was like, is deplatforming the new burned at the stake? It is. Right? Yeah. It's not a far stretch, is it?
It's, the cancel culture is the burning, right? The deplatforming is the death, right? And so what they do is before they try to deplatform, they first have to villainize them, right? Yeah. And so they'll go after them and they'll attack their character. And that way they have justification for the next part, which is the death, right? And so it is 100%. And so just like the church was killing people trying to maintain their grip, today they're deplatforming people trying to maintain their grip.
What strikes me most about that, Mark, is I feel like most people who are firm Bitcoin advocates had an aha moment at some point, right? Whether it was, they read the white paper and they got it, the light bulb went on and they're like, yes, I'm all in, something along the way, whether it was just more recently when currency debasement became, as you said, like a mainstream understanding, and people make that transition and say, aha, now I get it. I've gravitated further and further down, I don't know, the Bitcoin rabbit hole. I own more Bitcoin is all I'm saying, but I never had my aha moment, to be honest with you, Mark. And I think that part of the reason was, although I think I'm having it now, that's where this is going. Part of the reason was because my background, I cut my teeth as a precious metals investor going back like a decade. And so the idea of like personal sovereignty and libertarianism was familiar to me, right? Off-grid wealth, all this stuff. And so when I heard that from the Bitcoin narrative, I was like, yes, it makes sense. It's also familiar. So the novelty factor isn't there. I see the efficiencies and that's appealing, but it wasn't like this breakthrough moment. However, right now, I don't know if anything troubles me as much as this cancel culture and this, deplatforming people for ridiculous reasons. And I'm led to wonder, and
for any reason, but yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on this? Like, what's the future of media in terms of decentralization? Like, do you see any concepts there that excite you, or do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. So again, this is a massive shift that's going to reorganize the entire world. So remember, for the last 250 years, people left the decentralized world, the farms, and they moved to the cities. And I couldn't just be anywhere in the world. I had to be in the United States, or the developed world. And I couldn't just be in the United States. I had to be in the city. I had to be in New York or Chicago or San Francisco. But what we've seen today is now with the internet, these big companies have been dematerialized, right? The software is eating the world, so to speak. And so now people are moving all over the United States. And now in the United States, and I'm sure in Canada as well, people are leaving the cities and they're going to live in rural areas. They're moving to Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, places they could have never lived before because there was no jobs. And today they can. Yeah. But they can also move to Mexico or El Salvador or you fill in the blank, right? And so I think people think that the world's very crowded, but if you fly in a plane over the United States and Canada, it's wide open, right? Yeah. It's just people had to be centralized for the cities. And I think over the next 100 years, we're going to see everyone start spreading out and decentralizing, and the states start losing their power. The thing they still have the power over is the money. And so really what we have to fix is the money. And the reason why I start with that, because you asked about these technologies, about decentralizing media. Media is already decentralized. It's the money, right? I can already go, I have about 14 people that work for me. They're all decentralized. They're all over the world, right? In the old days, my business was set up in New York City and the government would come squeeze me because what am I going to do? They're like the mob. What am I going to do? Move my business, right? But today my team is all over the place. And if they squeeze me, I'll just jump down to Mexico. What are they going to do, right? But they still control my money, still in the banking system, which is still run by the Federal Reserve. So we got to fix that. The internet is pretty decentralized. So for example, for what's it been, a decade or more, we've had like BitTorrent. Like I can go download movies and music on BitTorrent. They can't stop that.
Right.
They can't stop that. That has nothing to do with blockchain or Bitcoin or none of that. Now, sure, Twitter, right? Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, those are centralized apps and they're doing a lot of censorship, YouTube, et cetera. But the internet itself is pretty decentralized. So, Alex Jones is probably the most prominent example of someone who was deplatformed, probably the first person really. And he was completely wiped off the face of the earth. But yet he still gets over 2 million people watching his shows on his website. Mm-hmm. So as long as you know where he's at and you go to his website, you can still find him. You won't find him on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. Right. But if you go to his website, he's still getting millions of people going to watch him there. And so there's not a lot they can do to shut that down. What they can do is let's take Joe Rogan for an example. So Joe Rogan, and there's this whole Spotify thing and all that, right? So Spotify pays Joe Rogan. Now, if Joe Rogan were to leave Spotify, he would take all those people with him. Wherever he went, he gets 200 million views a month. Those 200 million people would follow him wherever he went. But how can he make money? Well, that's what we have to fix. So with Bitcoin, for example, he could accept Bitcoin payments. And so there's technology, back to the technology you're asking me about. So there's something called Podcasting 2.0, and it was actually started by Adam Curry. Adam Curry was one of the original VJs from MTV. Okay. And so I think the iTunes database, forgive me on these numbers, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but the iTunes listing is the largest podcast listing out there. And there's something like, I forget, 800,000 podcasts or something like that listed, whatever the number is. But sure. Podcasting 2.0 maintains their own podcast index, and it has like, I don't know, whatever. It's got like 5 times the amount of, I'm sorry, I don't remember the numbers off the head, but it's got all the podcasts of the world. It's a decentralized listing of every podcast, whereas iTunes only lists the podcasts they want. Right. But on Podcasting 2.0, they're all there. And what they do is now there's technology. So there's technologies they can implement. One that I'm starting to use now is called Zion. And basically when users, it's a value for value model. Imagine that. Imagine me giving value for your value back, right? That's how the world should work. And so it's a value for value model. So what happens is I can host my podcast on this network. And instead of having me to go get like advertisers and like shill advertisers, what I can do is I can say, hey, if you're a fan of my content and you value what I'm providing, right, as you stream my content down, you can stream money back. Okay. Now imagine I used to have a wall full of DVDs and CDs, and now we don't have that anymore because we stream our content. Yeah. Imagine streaming money. Well, you can with Bitcoin. With Bitcoin are broken down in Satoshis, 100 million sats equal a Bitcoin. Sure. And so we can stream sats. So what I can say is to stream my content, it's 10 sats a second or 100 sats a minute or whatever amount I want to put on there. And you can, so as you're streaming my content down, you stream sats back to me. And now the users pay for the content they consume. And they can do it via micropayments. I mean, I think it's about 1,200 sats is $1. So, 10 sats is like a penny or whatever, right? It's like a fraction. And so there's a lot of applications that do this now. So I can list it on Podcasting 2.0. I can do a value for value transfer via Bitcoin. And then using like the Zion app, for example, I have it on my phone. It's like, it has about the same functionality of Telegram. So I can create a community and everyone can chat in a thread, like on Telegram. And then all my podcast episodes are in there. So then I can release all my content in there. All my community can chat. I can chat with them. We can all send sats back and forth to each other. And it's all built on Bitcoin. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that if we're in Telegram, I create a community in Telegram. When we're trading messages over Telegram, that message is going over the Telegram server or through the Telegram server. Right. When I'm doing it over Zion, my message is going peer to peer with you over the Bitcoin network. It's not going through anybody's server. It's peer to peer. And then it fixes all kinds of problems. You as a creator know this firsthand. The internet's pretty much a dumpster fire right now. And what do I mean by that? As a YouTuber, dude, I have a full-time person that goes through my YouTube comments and deletes spam. Yeah. Like it's insane, right? Yeah. I have on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook, I have dozens of impersonator accounts popping up daily that I can't do anything about. I mean, on Twitter, I can't even go read my DMs. They're just full of spam, right? It's a dumpster fire. All my comments, if I put Bitcoin in the comment on a tweet, I just get full of junk, right? It's a complete disaster. Bitcoin can fix that. So how do we do that? So with Zion, what they've done, and actually Adam Back, who's one of the creators of Bitcoin, he originally started with something called sorry, I'm drawing a blank, but what he was originally trying to do with proof of work is try to prevent email spam. And what you do is you put a little tiny payment. So for example, if I said, and what we can do on Zion is I can say, you can join my community and it's 10 sats. 10 sats is like a penny, half a penny, right? It's inconsequential to you. But if you're a spammer trying to spam 1 million communities, that's a big deal, right? Yeah. And then what I can say is, okay, in order for you to be active in my community, it's a 10 sat, 100 sat, 1,000 sat bond. And as long as you're a good community, that bond's good. But if I mark your message as spam, you lose your bond.
Interesting.
And so what it does is it's inconsequential for the user, for me. But see, what happens right now with the spam on Twitter and on Instagram, on Facebook and YouTube is that they can just spam the crap out of me. Yeah. And it's no time or money on their side. But for me, it could take an hour of my day. Oh, yeah. Go delete all that stuff. So there's a cost to me, but there's no cost to them. So what Zion's done is they built this payment piece. And remember, it's not about the internet, it's about the payments. We have to fix the payments. And so by doing these micro payments, they can put this in. And there's actually a proposal in to license this or be able to build this right into Twitter and Instagram. So basically with Twitter, what we're trying to get them to do is that as a Twitter user, I could decide to go post a bond in some sats. And again, if it's a penny, it's inconsequential. And then I could get like an orange check mark. And then if Twitter would allow me to say, I only accept comments from orange check marks. And that means someone has put up a bond. This way, they don't have to dox themselves. This way, they don't have to show some like online verification. Right. All we know is they put up a bond. And so anyway, that's a pretty cool technology. It's all being built on Bitcoin. And it's only that solution to that problem is only possible with Bitcoin.
Yeah, those are important barriers to entry. They don't exist now. And I remember when I first got like exactly what you're saying, the YouTube comment spam. And when it first happened to me, I was scrolling through and I was like, who is this? Jay Martin on my account, like selling investment advice through a WhatsApp
with your picture.
Number, right? With my picture. And, 50 minutes later, I realized it's not one account. It's just like every new comment's a new account because I can't get rid of them. They're like, it's like an infestation. And so I'm calling YouTube support and they really just shrug their shoulders. They're like, we can't really do anything about this. Right. And now, yes, it's systemic, right? Twitter, there's somebody on Discord under my name selling investment advice. Like how many times have I'm not on Discord. Don't buy anything. And I don't sell investment advice. So I'm going to check this out because Mark, I'm not familiar at all with Podcast 2.0 or Zion app, but this is really exciting. This feels like exactly what I've been looking for.
It's super exciting. And what I love about it is that, to the point, like if you've asked these platforms like, YouTube or whatever to fix this, what they would probably come up with is some even more draconian, more centralized answer. So for example, okay, what we're going to do is every user now has to upload their credit card statement, their address verification, their passport with the thing. And like everyone has to be verified. Like we don't need that. Like we can still keep the internet anonymous and open, but just post a bond, right? It could be that easy. So like this is kind of what it looks like. You can see like all the communities right here. Yeah. And like I can go like into my community. And you can see here, it's like a Telegram thread. There's like messages. And then down below here is like my podcast listed. I can click that. And then it shows like all my podcast episodes right there.
All right. Okay. And
then what's cool is then like, if you were in my community, like then I can talk to you one-on-one, just like Telegram. Right. And then we can even send sats back and forth to each other.
Interesting.
Over the app.
And then if I'm downloading your podcast, essentially I'm streaming cash or wealth back to you in the form of Bitcoin.
I can set that up as a requirement. I don't have that currently, but a lot of people do. And so what we think will happen is then the Joe Rogan of the world can say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go do it over here. And the users will just pay me what they think is fair, value for value, right? Like, would you pay Joe Rogan $1 to listen to one of his podcasts?
I would.
Right. And so he gets 200 million.
Especially if it was a la carte, right? Yeah.
Right. So would you pay him $1 for that value? Well, he gets 200 million downloads a month. So what's 200 million times $1?
Yeah, it's not bad. Not bad.
Huh. I mean, it's more than he's making now.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I feel like we're watching media break right now, and cancel culture will never be satisfied. It's not like eventually, the world will be in a safe place and cancel culture can retire and say, okay, we're satisfied now, right?
Yeah.
The world is safe again. Like it eventually, I think has to eventually consume itself because it will keep on going and keep on going. You'll move the line until there's
I think it already has. I think it's already gone too far. So what happens is trust, right? The world operates on trust. They want, what backs the US dollar, for example?
Sure.
Well, it's the military, it's debt. No, it's trust, right? We always have to trust that currency will be, someone else will take that currency. And the trust is broken and trust is very fragile. So if you had like a business partner that you were suspecting of embezzling, for example, and you were thinking that, and you had these doubts about him. And then you went to your partner and you said, hey, can we just look at the bank statements and look at a couple of these charges? And he said, oh, no. Like, you don't want to see that. Like all of a sudden you would know there was a problem versus if he said, yeah, hey, here we go. Let's discuss it. Right. And so they've already lost the trust. The more that they try to censor, the more trust is lost. And the only way they can get trust back is through open, honest discussion and transparency, but they can't do that. And so at this point, all they can do, so take Joe Rogan, for example, he's been majorly attacked recently because he's spreading misinformation, supposedly. He had 2 doctors on, right? Dr. Malone, Dr. McCullough. They're both heavily credentialed. And supposedly it's misinformation. Okay, great. Have someone debate him. Like, let's debate. Get Dr. Fauci or Gupta or whoever and debate them. Let's bring it to the public and let's look.
Well, and that's such a ridiculous accusation when, I'm watching mainstream headlines right now with the most ridiculous claims. One of which that just popped up in my newsfeed like 4 times today was that the Prime Minister of Canada is the son of Fidel Castro. And I'm seeing this on like Fox News, for example, right? Like, is this, man, this is National Enquirer material.
Well, do you know if that's not true?
Okay. I can't prove it, Mark, but like,
well, but I mean, I don't want to voice it either way, but here's the point. I don't want to voice it either way, but I have seen that and I've seen the pictures of him and that, and supposedly I've seen pictures that his mom was with Fidel Castro or at some point. I don't know. I haven't put any time into this. I don't care. But here's the point. The point is, if that's not true, then why not just show that it's not true? If you suspected me of embezzling from you,
Sure.
I would say, Jay, let's look at the bank statements here, bro. I haven't done anything, right? And so it's the transparency that brings the truth and the confidence back. It's through hiding and censorship that creates more distrust. That's the problem. And so if Joe Rogan, if these doctors are spreading misinformation, great, bring some other doctors and let's hear about it. But when you can't bring transparency, when you can't argue that, then it destroys trust. And that's where the media is today. Unfortunately, they say, you don't prove a man wrong by ripping out his tongue. You only prove that you have something to hide.
Right. Yeah. Okay, guys, 3 last things. First, if you enjoy my interviews and would like a bit more, you can subscribe to my Friday newsletter. It's free, and the comment to subscribe is right beneath this video in that pinned comment. In this newsletter, I share my key lessons learned, takeaways, and any actions that I might be taking in the market as a consequence of what I've learned on the show. Second, when I started a YouTube channel, I never anticipated generating any advertising revenue, but coincidentally, I do now, which is awesome. And so what I've decided to do is donate this to an organization that is very close to my heart called Zero Ceiling. Their mission is to end youth homelessness. The way they do this is by providing young people experiencing homelessness with supportive housing, employment, professional support, life skills, and outdoor adventure. Because often young people in urban centers with no resources will never get the opportunity to experience wild places, nature that can be so transformational, and absolutely was for me. Third, if you prefer to listen to my content, you can now find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for The Jay Martin Show.